Good day, everyone. I'm Andrea Mitchell in Washington, and we're learning a lot more about the evidence that federal investigators used to get that court-approved search warrant for Mar-a-Lago last summer. The new details made public by a Florida judge include Justice Department concerns about the whereabouts of top-secret documents. Also unsealed security videos not made available to the public showing Trump personal aide Walt Nauta moving boxes out of a storage area where Trump had previously acknowledged keeping classified documents. And just 1 hour ago in Florida, Mr. Nauta finally making his initial court appearance and pleading not guilty during his arraignment in Miami after 2 failed attempts by Nauta to hire a Florida lawyer for the proceedings. Joining me now is NBC's Garrett Haake and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. So, Garrett, what have you learned from what's been made public a lot in the last 24 hours? A lot is still redacted, but that search warrant was a trove of new evidence for us.
Yeah, that's right. There's a ton of detail in here about how the FBI and the Justice Department came to their conclusions that that search on Mar-a-Lago that sort of brought this case into the open public knowledge became necessary. They describe a months-long campaign of letters back and forth to the Trump attorneys, to the custodian of documents, trying to figure out what's there. And then the piece of evidence that really opens it up is the videotapes that you just described, in which investigators say they can see Walt Nauta go into the storage room, boxes come out, not as many boxes come back in, and then the Trump attorney attests basically, oh, look, I've turned over everything we've got. The FBI can watch the tape and say, we know you didn't search all the boxes. It's clear that's the evidence that really kicked this thing into high gear and, again, ultimately led to that raid that made us all aware of exactly what was going on at Mar-a-Lago.
And, Garrett, Evan Corcoran, one of the key attorneys there, he didn't sign the affidavit, but he also attested to that he thought it was all turned over, and that he did that not knowingly. He was misled by his client, is the claim.
That does seem to be the case that's laid out in this affidavit, that Corcoran would not have been party to all the knowledge about where these boxes even were. He may very well have thought that everything that was in the storage room at the time it was searched was, in fact, everything. We know from the indictment itself and from this affidavit that that wasn't the case. But again, it's not clear that Corcoran knew this at the time, what he was told or what he was not told. And as you pointed out, perhaps a majority of this document is still redacted. There's a lot that the FBI and the DOJ know about this search that we still don't.
And Joyce Vance, and I should point out that I believe NBC News was one of the litigants. The media were pressing for the redactions to be removed. What's your reaction to the revelations so far, and what the security videos could mean for Walt Nauta, who just pleaded not guilty today?
Well, it means, Andrea, to answer the last part of that first, that there will be an enormous amount of pressure on Walt Nauta to cooperate with the government. If he does not, it's almost a certainty that he will go to prison for years. He is part of the obstruction of justice in this case, and those penalties are very significant. We knew a lot of the information we're seeing in these newly unredacted bits of the affidavit from the indictment itself. But what this does is it confirms our understanding that the evidence that prosecutors have compiled here is thorough, it is detailed, it is overwhelming. They will have physical evidence in the form of video showing the number of boxes that were there, boxes that were removed, boxes that attorneys couldn't search, and that means that Walt Nauta and Donald Trump tried to conceal them from the government. So this new evidence only adds to the pressure that will mount on Nauta at some point in these proceedings.
But at the same time, we see him still as the body man. He's still with Donald Trump at every stop. So with that kind of relationship and presumably a lifetime guarantee for him, for his family, whatever else might have been offered, they're not even supposed to talk about the case, but they're together morning to night in the closest possible way. How could he actually flip?
It's a very interesting situation because the reporting suggests that his lawyer is being paid for by one of Trump's PACs. There was also reporting that Trump had to approve his selection of a lawyer. And we've seen how that works in other cases. For instance, with Trump's business CFO, Alan Weisselberg, who has continued to support Trump, who has gone to prison for Trump. But others have broken away. We saw Cassidy Hutchinson during the January 6th committee hearings. And she tells the story of how she felt compelled to stay close to Trump because she could not afford to pay for a lawyer. That seems similar to the situation that Nauta is in. But even his lawyer, who is paid for by Donald Trump, in essence, has an obligation to represent Walt Nauta and to bring to him any offers the government makes, so that if prosecutors suggest that he should perhaps come in for a proffer or that there might be some way to resolve his situation, then his lawyers are obligated to bring that to him and let him decide for himself.
And Garrett, you've watched this relationship up close. Before we go, I want to ask you about that, and also the campaign finance haul. You know, as the quarter ended, Donald Trump brought in a lot of money from his own fundraising, I guess, and from the super PAC.
That's absolutely right. Now, on the relationship, Nauta and Trump have been inseparable since Trump's been out of office. I've covered numerous events where he is right there by his side. I mean, the idea that there's any daylight between them physically just isn't there. Now, on the campaign finance front, it's interesting because this is yet another case in which the legal issues around Donald Trump and the campaign of Donald Trump are inextricably intertwined. The campaign is now saying that they raised $35 million for their combined campaign and for the Save America PAC, which is interesting because that PAC is being used in part to pay some of Donald Trump's legal fees and could potentially be being used to pay Nauta's as well. Now, look, we're in campaign finance season. All the campaigns try to get out the most favorable tale that they can tell about their fundraising. For the Trump campaign, this coming from a campaign official who told me about this top line $35 million number, what they're not saying is how much they're spending, what they have left on hand, and what's the split between the campaign and the PAC. All that information will still come out, but that top line number is enormous and will likely dwarf anything else that the rest of the field's able to bring in.
And it's probably one of the reasons why, well, a lot of reasons why the president is doing so many campaign trips, not today's, but other trips.
Public perceptions of how big those numbers can be are a big story early July all the time in campaigns.
It builds momentum.
It does.
And supporters. Garrett Haake, thanks so much. Good to see you in from the trail.
Thank you.
And Joyce Vance, to you, thank you so much. And